a primary CLIL teacher for a long time. And then I decided to conduct some scientific research. I did a PhD, and at the moment I am teaching to future teachers. And this is something that makes me very happy to share some kind of expertise that I might have got during these years with young people eager to implement these new methodologies in the classrooms. So first of all, I'm going to let you know what we're going to talk about in this session, right? We're going to talk about the reasons to plan for authentic learning in CLIL, and we're going to try to understand um, the need and why to do it, because one thing is to understand the need of something, and a different thing is to put it into practice. So what I'm going to try to do is to give you a very practical point of view of some key principles and theoretical foundations that sometimes are difficult to combine in classes in which curricular content is taught. And one of the speakers and one of the participants was saying sometimes it's hard to combine these formative assessment practices with summative assessment practices as well, to help the students really demonstrate what they've learned at a standardized test, right? Because sometimes some countries do have this kind of assessment at the end of mandatory education in which CLIL is implemented. Okay, so however, the first thing I'm going to do is just to ask you for a favor, for your help. At the moment, Professor Tsuchiya-san and I, we are conducting scientific research on CLIL teachers' competence to plan for CLIL, right? So we would appreciate it a lot if you can fill in a very brief questionnaire. We have translated into Japanese to help you understand better what we want you to answer. It is a questionnaire that consists of some questions to identify the categories of the teachers participating, and then few questions measures with a Likert scale 1 to 6, in which you have to answer in which degree you have integrated these principles connected to an ideal CLIL lesson plan, right? So think, if you have integrated this principle in the form of item in the questionnaire, then consider from 1 to 6 in what degree, right? And this is all. So I give you a few minutes, and if you are kind enough to collaborate, we would appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much.
I just posted the link to the chat, so it would be nice if you open it and if you fill in the survey. And if you have any questions on the items, I think there must be English version and the Japanese version. Is this Japanese version or English version?
Both.
Both.
At the same time. The
Right.
English question and the Japanese question appear at the same time.
Yes, of course. So the first couple of pages you can just see English, but afterwards I think you can see both English and Japanese. But I don't know, in some place you might feel it's not, you're not quite sure what it meant. In that case, you could ask Magdalena actually. It's part of Magdalena's PhD study. I think you've done it in this, developing this kind of criteria for CLIL teachers' abilities and skills as a PhD study, I guess. Yeah.
Well, yes, I did my PhD based on trying to understand what the weaknesses and strengths of CLIL teachers are concerning the way they plan their lessons. Because in my opinion, lesson planning is key to effective CLIL teaching. But I realized that around me, some teachers were struggling with CLIL, and that was due to lack of planning, lack of understanding the rationale of a CLIL lesson plan. So I decided to create an ideal CLIL lesson plan, and based on this ideal CLIL lesson plan, I created the questionnaire, validated it in my thesis, and now I'm using it to measure CLIL teachers' competence to plan CLIL lessons in different countries, regions, and in service, pre-service. So just to find out what the strengths and weaknesses in each particular region or university, or depending on the research, and to try to provide, in the case of that we find out some weaknesses, compare them and try to exchange this knowledge and improve, in the end, teachers' practice, which is the important thing.
So did you do this survey to primary or secondary and tertiary level teachers both?
Both. I did for primary and secondary. Originally, the thesis was conducted with a sample of almost 500 teachers, primary teachers and secondary teachers.
In Madrid.
And the results have been published in several papers, and of course in the thesis itself.
Yeah. I think it's almost. I think it's. Yeah, I think you could go.
Can I continue?
Ahead.
Yeah,
I guess
let's
so, yeah.
go on. All right, fantastic. So first of all, muchas gracias for your collaboration, and our apologies for interrupting in such a way. But this is really important, that we can find out these areas in which we can think about techniques, strategies to improve and make easier. Teachers, CLIL teachers have lots of challenges, and it's difficult to implement CLIL in practice. So we have to look after that and try to research as much as possible. So thank you very much. And let's go to take a look at, first of all, the concept of authentic learning. What does it mean? Well, in CLIL, obviously, the most difficult thing we can do is learn. Yeah, when we learn, we are doing our best, and we can learn at different levels of difficulty. Bloom's told us, you can remember, and then you can understand. And if you understand, perhaps you might be able to apply things. And if you are able to apply things, perhaps you can analyze. And luckily, you will be able to evaluate, and sometimes you can produce new knowledge. And this is how we learn. And the fact is that in CLIL, this type of learning not only happens in cognitive terms, it also happens at the same time in linguistic terms, because students are pushed to develop these cognitive skills in a foreign language. Therefore, the challenge of CLIL is huge. And let's analyze what these features are. When we push students to learn curricular content in a foreign language, we are pushing them to learn two things at the same time. The content that they are supposed to learn as any other student, not only, these particular CLIL students will learn this content. No, in Spain, in the schools, state schools implement CLIL, and the curricular content comes from the official curriculum. So there is no difference with non-CLIL students. And plus language, right? So there is an integration of skills, cognitive skills and linguistic skills. And there is not just one way to develop CLIL. CLIL lacks of curriculum. CLIL is a very open, flexible, eclectic approach to teaching and learning. And this is an advantage, but this is also something that can be ambiguous for some teachers, right? In particular, those lacking training in the fundamentals and theoretical principles of CLIL, right? And in all these contexts of learning, it is very important to pay attention to the role of the language, because if we learn in a parallel way or in an integrated way, as the term CLIL says, the content and the language, what is the role of that language? Is the role being the target of the lesson to be learned or not? As Professor De Boer was saying, should be something more spontaneous, more, coming from the need to communicate in the tasks you provide the students with. Therefore, if we want to assess this type of complex learning situation, we have to be very careful with the assessment, and we have to look for the best assessment tools that can help us conduct this integration until the end of the process, all right? Because we start teaching CLIL, and we should finish our CLIL lessons as CLIL, that is integrating the content and the language in the assessment tools. So about the role of the language, there are many different questions that we always have in mind around CLIL. Is the language something we should assess? What happens with those students who are inhibited, by the language or are not performing well? And then we think they are not getting the content that well. And what aspects of the language should we bear in mind when we are going to design our assessment tools? So to answer these questions, we have different points of view. Some authors say, well, in CLIL, the language is a vehicle. It's something we use to communicate and interact in order to learn. So that's the role of the language. Do not pay much attention when you assess. Other other authors think that we can put emphasis on teaching the language at the same time. We can plan for it and therefore assess it as well. How to do it, that's a different story, right? And then there is the eclectic perspective. That is the one I like. It's the one that says no matter what you do, if you want to assess, you don't assess, whatever you do, you have to bear in mind, you have to consider that there is an effective side. When you listen to students who are very fluent, you can be influenced by this when you are assessing the students. So we have to be very careful and design very well the assessment strategy in order to give the language the expected role to keep the assessment procedure fair for all the students, those who are very high at the proficiency or very low, okay? So the language should never be an invisible component of a CLIL class. We as CLIL teachers have to bear in mind that our students are coping with foreign language vocabulary, strategies, culture. Culture is inherent to the language. So we have to consider that there might be lots of different things the students are going to struggle with. For instance, in English, we say village, town, okay, and city. We have three terms to say that. In Spanish, we have only two. And if you don't plan for this, if you don't realize in advance, students might struggle when understanding texts. So we have to prepare a language demands analysis in advance, considering the kind of language we're going to push students towards, and then measure the progress, try to be aware of the level they are and where they go with the language as we do with the content. Because if not, we are teaching in the dark. We're just, giving them content in a foreign language. And yeah, as a matter of magic, they learn the English. No, they have to be progressing, and this progression needs to be tracked. And the teachers need to be aware of this progression. And the question is how to do that? Well, of course, a teacher cannot decide what the level for each student is. We need, as I said at the beginning, there is no clear curriculum. There is not such a thing. So how can we decide, well, my students are at A1, at A2, at B, whatever. Okay, so, and what descriptors for the language do I use? Because Professor De Boer was saying, use assessment criteria in order to combine integration of content and language. So the criteria from the language, where does it come from? At what level do I place these criteria? So in this sense, the Common European Framework, in particular, its new volume with new scales, is really useful. You can find there lots of different rubrics, holistic rubrics, considering what students are expected to do at different levels. And you can not only place your group of students at one particular level, but also within the group, you might have students performing in the language at a higher level than the rest or lower, and then you can adapt and perform the assessment in a fair way, right? And obviously, to make the integration, these descriptors from the Common European Framework should be linked to the content learning goals. We're going to see it from practice, how I have implemented this combination of these CLIL principles right into my classes. So what I usually do is I have a particular curricular content I want to teach. I have to teach my students because it's official curriculum, it's mandatory content they have to learn. And as the speaker said, in a particular time, right? So I have to rush sometimes. Well, and then there is always an authentic task, something that helps me combine an authentic language, something that they need to discuss, to explain, to describe, to do with the foreign language around the content they are learning. Therefore, genders are connected to these authentic tasks. And by connecting these authentic tasks with the content, these descriptors that are in all these genders in the Common European Framework, you can find scales to measure all of them. Then we can include these descriptors from the scales of the CEFOR in the tasks. For instance, when I teach the food pyramid, what ideas? Well, I can maybe do a recipe book of healthy food, or I can do an advertisement of be alert, unhealthy food damage your health, or I can write an article paper, right? So I can work on different genders connected to authentic tasks, and this helps me integrate language skills and content, curricular content, to develop classes in English in an effective way and producing some kind of improvement in these kinds of academic language. Because remember that in CLIL, the language of CLIL is not only the interaction, which is also CLIL, right? Classroom language is really important in CLIL because it happens in an authentic context. The students are using the language for real purposes. The purpose is learning. What other use can we talk about being more real than doing the learning, the most difficult thing we can do at school, right? So, and this would be examples. Let's consider that I am teaching geography. I am doing with my students, the learning of the capitals of Spain. So rather than memorizing the capitals, what I usually do is perhaps giving them opportunities to create brochures of different capitals. Then they have the choice to find out their favorite place. Maybe they went on holidays. By introducing these authentic tasks, you give them the possibility to personalize, to have a voice, to make the choice on their own. They have more freedom. They approach the content from a more open, flexible way, right? For instance, how about the solar system? Pluto is not a planet anymore. That's interesting for children. Maybe a report, you can help them, the strategies to write a report on something. Then they learn by doing that, the difference between a planet and something that is not a planet, right? So there is better understanding of the content when you propose these authentic tasks, because what you do is to move from the mere remembering and understanding towards higher order thinking skills. You give them a context. Let's think about teaching them mixtures, solutions, right? So why not potions, magic potions? They can think of different combinations. You can experiment. You can write. You can help them to give instructions on how to prepare a mixture. So there are lots of different things that they can produce from this content, but you have to give them the tools. You have to plan for all these things to happen. So in these authentic tasks, performance-based teaching, the role of the teacher is not explaining the content, it's providing students with something to do that involves the learning, all right? Let's think about learning things on the ecosystem, all right? Then perhaps a debate, extinct animals, or, the food change and how cruel for some students at primary education this sounds. So let's help them understand, analyze the world where they live in a more authentic way, right? Not just doing the reading and the understanding with the activities. So just presenting challenges towards the content by means of authentic tasks. In this case, scientific women, then maybe a biography. So there is always the possibility with these examples. I'm trying to help you understand that you can always link the teaching of the content with an authentic task that involves a particular gender. And why these authentic tasks? Well, there are many reasons, of course, why we have but we can use these authentic tasks as the starting point of a CLIL lesson. But basically, as Professor De Boer was explaining, learning in CLIL needs to be hands-on, needs to be learner-centered. Learning in CLIL contexts cannot happen if the teacher explains, because you're going to explain in English, and they, at primary education, perhaps they won't be able to understand you. So what you have to do is to plan in such a way that you provide the students with specific tasks, activities that give them the possibility to learn, discover information, knowledge, first declarative facts that you remember, then that you can understand, and then that you can apply, and then develop in them the attitude that is going to be based on motivation, on the desire to learn. Why does a little bird fly for the first time? So this is what we have to find in our students. Give them a reason for learning. Why? Why learning? What is behind this content? And this is something that when happens, it's really beautiful and very, very rewarding. So why these authentic tasks? Obviously, because they give them a richer context for learning, and they prepare students for real world. In the world, it's not useful to know things by heart. What you are requested is to do things, to perform in any kind of job. So let's start from the beginning, learning content from this perspective, right? Also, and this is something very popular in teaching, we don't learn as much as, you can learn when you only read, or when you only read and listen. Or so the more sensory learning you provide the students with, the richer the experience of learning is, and the more learner-centered, the better the learning is, and more meaningful. Because the point in CLIL is that learning needs to be constructed by means of the foreign language. So if you just talk or they just read, and it is based on only one particular skill or two, this is too poor. Then learning is not going to happen in a quality level, at a quality level, I mean, right? Perhaps they will be able to memorize, because some children are really good at memorizing, and they will learn lots of definitions and words in English, but this is not authentic learning. This is not something they will be able perhaps to do. So as I was saying, by providing students with these authentic tasks, they will be motivated, and you give them a sense of success. When you do something and you're able to complete a task, you feel you can do, and if you can do, you want to continue doing. So learning is not based on a passive, receiving information and then showing that you remember this information. It's more than that. And you give a space to creativity, because these tasks, these authentic tasks, can be open, can be flexible. Not all the groups, not everybody has to do the same thing. So they can end up into totally different things. And of course, they develop cognitive skills, confidence, because it requires teamwork. And therefore, they are going to develop collaborative skills, and they will develop social interaction skills. And I think it's a fantastic context for learning. The most important thing why we should use these kind of authentic tasks for implementing CLIL is that they give us the possibility to integrate all these components that learning in a foreign language involve. That is the content, of course, the language, but also the communication skills, the culture that is inherent to this communication and this cognitive development. So by providing authentic tasks, we are more likely to help the students perform authentic CLIL. Now I want to share with you an authentic task developed at year 2. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint, and I'm just going to share with you the presentation. Okay, I'm going to go to the place I want to share, and now I will be able to share it with you. There we go. So I'm going to show you this final product. That's the Living Things test by Kenta. So this is a test a year to students that's 7, 8 years old, prepared when learning about living things and non-living things. Okay, the final product I prepared, the authentic task, was creating a questionnaire. Some students did written questionnaires, and this student did this this presentation, including the questionnaire. So first of all, look, is a car a living thing? Here, there are the sentences from the book. Is born, grows, eats, reproduces, and dies. And I find extremely interesting that the child illustrated each concept to demonstrate that it's not so clear. There is ambiguity, in particular for a child's mind, right? Because they said, well, it's born in the factory, doesn't grow, but fuel, can look like food for them, right? And that's not reproduced, but actually you die when you crash, right? So what is a living thing? Can we know just with this information on the book? And he transformed the questions into a test. And using mathematics, he calculated the answers. He put the sentences on the book, on the science book, into these questions. Is it brought into life by birth? Does it increase in size by a natural process? As you can see, this is very academic language. The student was not producing the language himself, but was copying from the book, but was understanding the meaning, which is a fantastic step at this age, right? After having all these questions, if we answer them, right, let's answer them. Is it brought into life by birth? No. Does it increase in size by a natural process? No. Does it eat? Let's say yes. I don't count this no, okay? Does it generate other members? No, obviously not. Does it breathe? No. So I have 4 no's. Does it die? We don't know. We didn't know. That was ambiguous, right? But we have 4 no's. And this child thought, sorry, I clicked on the wrong button. Thought, test results, calculated. If you get 4 right answers, it is a living thing. But if it is 4 no answers, it's a non-living thing. Therefore, we have 4 no's, then it's not a living thing. This is a scientific perspective. So he's not only learning the difference between living thing and non-living thing, but he's going much beyond this knowledge, right? He's going, far away from this. In my opinion, this is a fantastic level of learning. But not only that, is that remember, definition. A living thing is a person, animal, or plant. And finally, I love persuasion. So as Professor De Boer was saying, when you provide students with authentic tasks that are open, they use by themselves different strategies, different gender types, different language that you perhaps are not planning for, but they in the end need in order to complete the task. And this is wonderful. And you can support this. This is the kind of language you can support. And this is the language for learning, the most wonderful one, because it's the one that comes when you develop the tasks, right? So why don't you try the living thing test again? So repeat the process, please, is what this child is saying, right? So that was an example of how all this theory I have been trying to, give me a second. I'm going to share the PowerPoint again. Yes, here I am. All right, so this just was an example, right, of this kind of authentic task. And as I said, by doing this kind of authentic task, the student is learning the content, certainly. He's developing procedural knowledge. He's doing something with this content and is integrating the language from an active point of view, because he's using this foreign language to create something. And believe me, that the website Prezi has reset everything, and the visits now appear at 70 something. But this was created in 2011, and the visits, like 1 year ago, were almost 1,000 visits. So some other students and teachers were using this test in order to perhaps learn with it, right? So that was wonderful. Okay. It's not working now, the PowerPoint. Okay, now. So finally, as I said, this is the reason, right, that we can integrate all the CLIL components into the tasks. So now let's take a look at authentic assessment. So if we're able to develop these authentic tasks, then how do we assess them? There is something we have to change in the strategy of traditional teaching based on content and testing the understanding, okay? Because testing testing stays at a very low level of the cognitive taxonomy, actually. So let's see what the requirements of this kind of performance-based learning is, right? So first of all, the duality. I mean, if we're going to perform these authentic tasks in the class, we have to use assessment that allows the integration of these dual learning of the content and the language at the same time. And also tools that are likely to reflect what is happening in the class. So not only at the end, not only when the students have learned something and produced something, but as Professor De Boer was saying before, during the process. That's the most interesting thing, when the authentic learning happens, when the skills are developed, when procedural knowledge is acquired. So according to Coyle, Hood, and Marsh, in their fantastic book on CLIL that we all have used, I suppose, there are several challenges in CLIL evaluation. The what, the content, the language, and many other skills involved in the learning. The who, not only the teacher, because if we're going to give students an active role in the learning process, why not give them this active role in the assessment? All right, and help them be aware of this process, where they are, where they need to go, and finally, what the level of performance is, right? When, not only at the end, let's pay attention to what is happening in the class during the process. Formative assessment or assessment for learning, as Professor De Boer was referring to. And how, this is what we're going to take a look at in the third part of the presentation, how to develop the strategy, right, of these rich contexts for assessment. And with what? The tools. These two things are the key point of this presentation. So definitely the challenge is to combine formative assessment and summative assessment. Why? Because we are teaching in state schools in which curricular content is taught, and these students will see standardized tests. The same tests their counterparts who are not bilingual, who are not learning CLIL. So we have to look after the content and measure also the quality of the learning. But before this happens, there are lots of things we can do to improve this learning, all right? And this is what we are going to try to do, to help the students be better autonomous learners, right? At the same time, we help them perform better in the evaluation and assessment process that is common in every, state school. And with what tools? Then, when we talk about these kinds of authentic assessment, we open the box of the tools. And not only tests, we also need other tools like rubrics, like thumbs up, thumbs down, random selection tool, portfolios, mini whiteboards, digital quick response tools, and checklists, exit slips, and many others, okay? So, authentic learning and assessment in practice. Now I'm going to show you how to develop all these with an example that is a real example with, spontaneous. Isn't it? The example you're going to see, I want you to know, it was not created to be a good model to show people how well I do CLIL. No, it's an authentic activity I performed in class. And you will see students do things that happened, and some of them had an argument before the recording. You can observe they are not looking at them in a very friendly way. So it is a real one, okay? So we can also see some. I will analyze later with you. Let's continue now. So let's see it from practice. The first thing is to take a look at the curriculum in CLIL. When CLIL is implemented at state schools, primary, secondary schools, the important thing is always the content. Students need to learn the particular content for the year, as well as non-CLIL students. So the example I'm going to share with you, was about this content: economy, entrepreneurship, budget, financial issues, and all these things, economics. So I took all these from the curriculum and thought, well, what can I do to teach this difficult content in English? So I thought, well, my authentic task is going to be setting up your own business. If you have the challenge to set up a business, you need to learn all that. So that was my authentic task. And the language was integrated there by asking students to present, to make sense of this creation. Because one thing is to create something, a different thing is to explain it and be able to make sense of it and have other people understand what you have created. So the challenge was double. And then by using the Common European Framework, I took some descriptors for addressing audiences at the level where my students were. In this group, my students were at A2 level and some of them at B1. So I created, I used a mixture of these descriptors, right? A combination of both. By this way, I was integrating the content and the language in my assessment tools. And I designed my criteria, the assessment criteria, of course, for the content learned, the creative knowledge, that was the commercial strategies, the development of the business, and the descriptors to then create the rubrics, the checklists, and all the tools that are going to help me observe this performance of the process of creation of the business. Then also criteria for the process, right? The design, the collaboration, the organization, lots more things that were not on the book. So I was enriching this lesson a lot in comparison to non-CLIL teachers teaching the same content. And of course, I integrated the criterion for the language. And I wrote several descriptors, some of them from the Common European Framework, as I said, to create my rubrics and checklists. And these are the assessment tools I used. First of all, I would like to show you some things I systematically used with my students, and I still use them at university, because the most important thing during the process in CLIL is interaction. So interaction and feedback are paramount. Therefore, if I want to ensure that all students participate, I use this random selection tool, right? Lion King is attractive for children, and then I have these sticks with their names, and then I ensure everybody is attentive because I call their names and they have to answer, participate. Trick: never give praising when using this tool. No right, wrong answers. Every answer is welcome. So students are not inhibited. They are really likely to participate and say whatever they think at first, okay? Then another tool for interaction, if I want to check whether they are learning, understanding or not, is to use mini whiteboards. I buy them in Hyakuen, Missy. So I buy this kind of material, I give them to students, they write and they can erase, right? And they can show me just at a glance, I can see all the answers, and the feedback I receive is immediate and a very good quality. Of course, for specific questions, right? I also use exit slips. I give a student these in order to get to know what they want to do. For instance, what is your business going to be about? And they give me here ideas, and then we discuss which is viable, which is not. Okay, so different tools in order to collect students' ideas, students' understanding, level of development of the hypothesis, made to understand the new content, the new process, okay? And also, I said, yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down. I mean, just physical, TPR, but this is very important for primary teachers. Students, when you ask them, did you understand? They usually say yes, because they want to be kind with you. But yes, that means nothing at all. What I do is to ask my students to say yes or no. And physically, I can see at a glance again if they are happy, I can continue, or I need to stay. Or if there are specific students who need to, more practice on that, and then I can go with the rest and prepare something extra. Actually, I already have it prepared usually in this case. So this is for interaction. Then, of course, we have to develop a scaffolding from the beginning, because authentic tasks start with children doing things, right? Not explaining. Teacher talking time is reduced. As Professor Du Bois was saying, the role of the teacher as the main agent disappears totally. And what I do is to prepare lots of different materials. I give my students from the beginning to give them their responsibility and the leading of the learning process. So I will show them later in a moment. Then during the process, I do not observe randomly. I prepare an observation chart with the aspects I want to observe. And then I reflect on that. And then I share with them these observations. And I have some specific things. I want to talk with each group, with each person, whatever, okay? Then, as I said, I give them the role of assessing themselves, or co-assessment also. And of course, a rubric to assess in a very comprehensive way, including categories for content, categories for process, categories for language, categories for group work, other social interaction skills, whatever. And finally, as I said, because this is curricular content in standardized schools, in schools that are going to perform standardized tests, I always give them a quiz, okay, to actually measure the level of understanding and ensure that they are acquiring the minimum expected. And this is the strategy, how to develop these in practice. So from the very beginning, share the rubric. Give them the possibility to know what they are expected to do during the process. From the very beginning, I give them the rubric. I analyze this rubric with them. This gives them development of learning to learn skills, metacognitive skills, right? When you can visualize what you're going to do and see different levels of performance of the same task. This is a really interesting exercise activity to start a class. And then I share with them the learning goals, what we have to go through, okay, and achieve. And I explain the criteria for content, for process, for language, what we're going to do, how we're going to do. And I provide this scaffolding, right? I show them what we are going to do. For instance, this is one rubric to assess students' performance of this business project. So I have included only the excellent column, right? Because what you can do to show you that what you can do is to copy and paste your criteria and descriptors that you have developed, and then you allocate them in the category, and then you copy the column and paste it in the very good, and using quantifiers, using modifiers, you describe a poorer performance of the task. And again, from very good, you copy and paste to good, and you describe a poorer performance of the task. And finally, you get all the descriptors for each of the categories. All right. And if you share these with the students, they will be very ready to start learning. So this is what you're going to watch in the video. They completed this business project. First, they had to create a slogan, and a logo. I gave them a visual organizer to understand the hierarchical relationship of people in companies. And they were guided by answering questions that were prepared to give them a very detailed analysis of the reasons why do one type of another type of business and considerations that are necessary when setting up a business. Also, they analyzed and created a budget for the company, all right? And the vocabulary was scaffolded, taken from the book, the incomes, the salary, the strategies, and you will see, you will listen to them explaining this budget later, and struggling with numbers, with lots of things that are difficult in English. And this is a scaffolding, a visual scaffolding I always prepared in my classes. It is it consists of different areas of language. I call it academic vocabulary, for them to be aware that this language on the poster is of a register that is not the language of English as a foreign language. It's a language that we use to explain things. It's language that we use to analyze things. It's language we use to learn, right? And then, as you can see, there are connectors in this case because they had to explain and give reasons and examples and, and compare things and contrast. You can see I have scaffolded with numbers because they had to read in the budget millions, okay, or thousands and all of these, and compare and quantity. So all this was placed and sometimes needed extra practice, okay, with the specific activities because they were not familiar with this language and they were not able to produce this language. So this is the way I integrate language chunks, okay, in the class according to the needs of the lesson. During the task, my role is to support students. Students always work, they are organized in groups, they know what to do, they have the material, and the material is scaffolded, and they can be autonomous when using it. So I support and I develop active observation, as I said, using my active observation checklist. And then I take notes and I approach different groups. I complete the rubrics and I give them information on where they are at that moment. And then I collect the rubrics again once they have read where they are. And we discuss how best to go to the excellent performance, right? What is missing and clear, clear steps on how to reach this excellent performance, right? This is the important thing. Not use the rubric at the end. Use the rubric during the process to provide this feedback that is described there, okay? And this is it. So when you use, in particular in primary education, this active observation checklist, you have recorded lots of information. And when you meet with the parents and you have to complain about something that happened, or you have to explain then some difficulties that a particular child is encountering when working in groups or something, you have objective information observed during the performance of the class, and it's not relying on your remembering of the situation and your subjective perspective of it, right? So it's more objective. And this is important, at least here in Spain, because parents are sometimes a little bit demanding. And after the task, you have to create an appropriate environment because you're going to share with the others something you did in a foreign language. So as I said, the example I'm going to show you is didn't achieve very well this environment, but no way, I had to do the presentations, and sometimes it happens at a very good level, sometimes it's not that perfect, but things are never totally perfect, right? That's according to my my experience. And then what I usually do is to record their performance when they are these kind of presentations. Why? Because if I record the performance, I give them the possibility to observe themselves and then conduct the self-assessment based on what they have performed actually, not what they remember they have performed. And this is better. It results on a better self-assessment. And I give them also a summative assessment tool at the end of the process, as I said, to ensure that, to gauge that the level is achieved and they know the minimum content required by the official curriculum. So this is an example of the integration, as I told you, of the descriptors of the SEPOR in the self-assessment checklist that I give to students. So one important thing is that by designing your criteria and descriptors, you do not use all of them in all the tools, but you distribute these descriptors in the different tools, depending on who uses and for what purpose the tool is designed, right? And this way, the assessment, it covers everything, is effective, otherwise it wouldn't be effective, okay? And you ensure you, you fulfill all these challenges stated by Coyle et al. As you could see on this video, they struggled with lots of things, right? And lovely things appear too, like churros. Churros, for people who are not Spanish, might be something strange. Churros are delicious, and children love churros for desserts. Yes, so, and as you can see, reading is not, good when you do a presentation. So classmates were teaching, don't read, because this is going to affect the assessment, right? If you read during a presentation, is not a good strategy. One thing is to use notes as a support, another thing is to read what you have done. So, and I also like this example because it shows their faces of satisfaction with what they've done. They are really satisfied with their company, and they think they're not going to fail in the first year, for instance. This is the attitude I was talking about, right? These students have demonstrated that they understand the rationale of a company. They can create a budget, and all these concepts on the book were put into a real context with an authentic task. And I assessed these authentic tasks by means of all these different assessment tools, including a wide variety of tools that provide you with different, feedback and give you the possibility to improve the process, right, until you arrive to the moment in which you measure. So this competency-based approach is really necessary in CLIL, and not only at primary level. I think it is paramount at any level of education. And Schneider has recently commented about the Spanish education system, of the need that we have to move towards this competency-based approach. This is one of the reasons why Spain is not performing very well in PISA examinations, because our educational system is based on a more traditional curriculum and, test assessment basis. So I think CLIL is introducing lots of positive aspects in our education system. And of course, we have to improve a lot, but I think this could be a very clear example of how to implement CLIL at primary education using authentic assessment. That was the purpose of my talk. Here is some references I used during the presentation, and at the end I have included this Mueller website in which you will find lots of already made resources which are very interesting. And that was all concerning the presentation. And now if you have any question or discuss, we can talk and and reflect on this difficult challenge we've got as CLIL teachers.
Muchas gracias. That's a wonderful talk. Thank you, Magdalena. And do you want to do the workshop today or not?
Yes, we've got time. I was just giving time for questions before. If there are no questions, we can move to do the Ruby Star activity with the audience.
Right, and I think Maxence is ready.
Yeah, I just brilliant. I loved this presentation. I really did.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, what I wanted to know is how you use the rubrics. I mean, it's really interesting because this is kind of maybe overlapping a little bit of research that I've been doing, but I'm really curious as to how the blank area of the rubrics. How did you? I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand how you did that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, to be honest, this rubric is created specifically using the descriptors, right, that I designed for my lesson planning, right? What I said is that if you copy and paste in the categories, the descriptors that are your descriptors, this means this is the excellent performance. Yeah. Then, so once you've got all of them, you copy and paste. And if it says they design an original logo and slogan in the excellent column, in the very good column, they design a slogan and a logo, and you delete original. So you can modify the descriptors from excellent performance to poorer performance. But this is time consuming. We have not time to do this systematically. So the workshop or the activity I have prepared is to show you how I really do it, is by means of using, for instance, not only this one, many different ones, but I have brought today one that is called an application that is called Ruby Star. With Ruby Star, what I do is I look for the authentic task I have prepared. Maybe it is a presentation, it is a brochure, it is a timeline, it is whatever of the selection I have told you before. And then clicking on this type of a rubric, I get automatically a selection of categories, and I can get all the descriptors written and I can edit them. I'm going to show you in a minute. And this is a much more efficient way to create rubrics, because analytic rubrics in particular are time consuming to create and to use. So we should be very careful. When we create an analytic rubric and we decide to use it properly for assessment, we have to use it from the beginning, systematically, being used to provide feedback during I usually take notes on the rubric when I give it to students. I share and discuss with them where they are in different aspects. I ask them to exchange the rubrics among groups to compare where they are in comparison with other people at this moment of the activity. So rubrics have a very active role during the assessment. When you use rubrics in this way, actually, the final result of the rubric can be a fantastic summative assessment if you score these categories, and no need for testing, actually. However, parents are used to testing, and then I also include the quiz just for this reason. But for me, the most interesting evidence of their learning is on the rubric. Yes?
Thank you, thank you. Yep.
Our task is persuade the parents. We are okay without it.
Yeah, I loved in the video how, as you can see in the video I shown you, they created lots of different stuff, like a menu, like a summary of something. That was not, I didn't ask them to do these things. That was their own decision. As Professor De Boy was saying, when you give them this opportunity to learn by means of creating something that makes sense to you, you develop lots of different strategies that are out of your control, right? And this enriches the class a lot. In terms of content learning, of course, because you develop higher order thinking skills, but in terms of language, it's amazing. So when I teach my students at university, those who are going to be CLIL teachers, and they say, Magdalena, I don't understand the difference between language of learning and language for learning. I always say then, language of is very easy. It's the language that is content obligatory. If you don't understand this language, you cannot do the lesson. So ensure that they are familiar with this vocabulary. But language 4, you have to be ready to improve this during the process. But language 4 is the language you need to interact, perform, develop, etc. So it's open, it's not closed. When you do your language demands analysis, this language should be open, always ready to, take from other classes, from other lesson plans. And the more you plan for your lessons and you do the language demands analysis, the better you provide the students with the necessary scaffolding. Because at primary education, I like to say the challenge is to ensure that the students interact in the foreign language. And this is very difficult. For this, you have to really give them the tools and the scaffolding. And if you don't prepare a good language demands analysis, this is impossible.
Good one. Do you want to take some other questions? Or it's 20 minutes to go, so.
Yeah, so if you want, we can go